gentlemen, we talk about the NFC wildcard picture. One of the first games we're going to be treated to on Sunday is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles traveling to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Ladies and gentlemen, the last time these two teams faced off, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers squeaked out a 28-22 victory. The score indicated it was a lot closer than it really was. But, second time around, when you have another matchup between these two teams, it's going to be very intriguing for the Eagles. Can they become road warriors? Dalton, I want to know your quick thoughts on that, and then we'll get into our X Factor players.
It's going to be really tough because they want to run the football, the Philadelphia Eagles. That's what they're very good at. Their offensive line is outstanding. The issue is that this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense is very, very good. They are very, very good at stopping the run. Vita Vea, the rest of that defense, with Devin White being back there running around freely because of Vita Vea is massive for that team. Now, the only kind of wrinkle is that their quarterback can rush as well. And that's always going to be a difficult assignment because not only do you have to be responsible for every gap now, you also have to be responsible for two ball carriers. So it changes the way that you play the run. They won't be able to just be able to fill gaps. They need to be responsible for Hurts as well. And that can make things really difficult on in defense. Now, I think it's all going to come down to, at the end of the day, how well Jalen Hurts is able to play as a passer against a team that I think has a really good secondary overall. I think that they're kind of the underrated part of this football team. It's the one that's not really talked about very much, but with Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting and Antoine Winfield Jr., these guys can all cover. So for me, it's going to be really difficult for anybody that's not named Devontae Smith to get any separation. And even Devontae Smith at, his current form, it's going to be difficult against that group of secondary members.
Get Marquez Watkins involved. Obviously, Dallas Goedert at the tight end position as well. Interesting thing about this one, too,
that's where they got to win.
Me, Levante David might be back for this game as he was
unreal, right?
To practice. I thought he was done with the foot injury because they said season-ending foot injury. Obviously, when it had happened, they didn't say that, hey, he could be back for the playoffs. So I'm kind of surprised to see that. But, man, getting him back alongside Devin White, they return back to form there, and it makes the optics of a Super Bowl defense easier. Now, going to the chat here on twitch.tv/Pro Football Network, getting to Quan Chapo. He says, I don't see a path to victory for Philly. It won't be a blowout, though. I mean, I think that's very fair. But, then again, like we have talked about it all season long, this has been so weird what we've seen from the NFL. Teams that we don't expect to win suddenly come in and win. The playoffs, obviously, the moment gets a little big for some teams, especially young and inexperienced teams. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to be up and coming, though, in the next couple of years. They have a lot of draft capital. They do have a lot of talent. But for them, I agree with you. I think it's going to be very tough for them to overcome the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, Dalton, I wanted to ask you, when you look at this matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Philadelphia Eagles, who is your X Factor player that people need to keep their eye on?
My X Factor player, let me pull it up real quick so I have all three of them, is going to be Darius Slay. I think that Slay probably deserved a bit more, some more flowers for his season this year. I felt like he really had a resurgence because he was not very good for Philadelphia last year. He kind of struggled along with the rest of that football team, but he really turned things around this year. And with Mike Evans being the one big target on the outside now for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I feel Darius Slay has to have a big game against the big wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles to be able to win. They need to be able to take Mike Evans away and make those guys like Tyler Johnson and Scotty Miller and Perryman and Gronk, those tight ends, O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate. Those are the guys that are going to need to beat you. If you can stop Mike Evans, it makes everything else easier.
That'd be very difficult, too, because they can't find themselves in a situation they were against the New York Jets where the Jets were knocking on the door of defeating them. Philadelphia is going to be a much tougher matchup than the New York Jets were. And obviously, Tom Brady is able to work some magic. Cyril Grayson Jr., though, he's still in the injury report. To my expectation, he's questionable for this weekend's matchup. The new emergence there for Tom Brady as we talk about the playoff legend that may continue to grow there. I think that the Bucs' key to victory is you got to maximize drives against a tough Philadelphia defense. They've been one of the best defenses in football since week 8 of the season, being able to adjust and stifle guys. You mentioned Darius Slay, your X factor guy. Well, he's had multiple return touchdowns. He's just been a force for them so far this season. Now, I think for the Eagles, a key to victory for them is create turnovers, avoid turnovers. As cliche as it sounds, if you can create turnovers off of this Tom Brady, Tampa Bay Buccaneers led offense, and you minimize their opportunities, and if you can maximize them, not just with Jalen Hurts as a rushing threat, but as you mentioned, it's going to come down to him being a more efficient passer. Can he turn it on for the playoffs? Because remember, just several years ago, this was the narrative with Lamar Jackson. Can he pass the ball in the playoffs? I think the same question can apply here to Jalen Hurts. So if they can avoid turning the football over from the Eagles' offensive standpoint, I think they have a puncher's chance to really come in here and maybe upset Tampa Bay, which would be shocking to everybody. But you know what? I wouldn't count it out at this point.
Yeah, and you know that the Philadelphia Eagles have dudes on that defensive line. I mean, when you just look at what they have here, and the linebackers have been an issue for this team now for years, but Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Sweat, Barnett hasn't been quite the player that we expected him to be, but they have 3 legitimate playmakers on that front line, and they have guys, Anthony Harris hasn't played the way that I thought he was going over from Minnesota. I felt like he was a great player in Minnesota. Things haven't worked out quite as well for him in Philadelphia, but kind of like Darius Slay, maybe he's able to kind of get it as the playoffs roll around and start being that difference maker that he was with the Vikings. You know, for me, it's all going to come down to, like you said, trying to be able to force turnovers against Tom Brady, because I think at the end of the day, that's the only way you beat him.
Quan Chapo in the chat says, I know running backs don't matter, but man, Tampa Bay has no threat at all, about to be led by Le'Veon Bell and Giovanni Bernard. Yeah. There is a chance, though, Leonard Fournette could make his return. Obviously, his window has opened for the Buccaneers since they placed him on IR. If they get him back this week, that'll be a big boost. But the question is, will he be on a pitch count coming off of that ankle injury? I'm not sure yet. So we'll have to see. Obviously, Le'Veon Bell, imagine if he turned back the time, the hands of time here, and just had an absolutely massive game here for the Buccaneers. Part of me, Dalton, I wouldn't be surprised. But then again, the NFL, it is wild, it is wacky. And that is our preview here for the Philadelphia Eagles against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, shifting gears now, we're going to get to one of our other matchups here on Sunday. And this is a fun one. And Dalton, I know you're excited about this. You might be a little bit nervous, but it's the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Now, these two teams did not meet in the regular season. They met in the 2020 season going into 2021. But also, when you look at this matchup between these two teams, this could reignite an old playoff rivalry that hasn't been around since 27 years ago, Dalton. So in your opinion, how are you feeling about this game, just from the aspect, not only just as an analyst, but I know you're a Cowboys fan. From a Cowboys fan standpoint, how are you feeling?
From a Cowboys fan standpoint, I feel great about it. When I look at it as an analyst, I see a guy who, in Nick Bosa, who is going to be really angry that he didn't get a second-team All-Pro nod. So he is going to be on the absolute attack. But they also have Eric Armstead. They also have Arden Key. Arden Key has been one of, pun intended, one of the key signings of this season. He's been fantastic as a pass rusher, especially on the interior for the San Francisco team. But just moreover for that, when it comes to this defense, I've talked about it a lot. Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt, 2 really good players in that San Francisco defense. And then you also have Fred Warner, who is one of the best cover linebackers in the NFL. At the end of the day, what makes me so confident as a Cowboys fan is those 2 outside corners. Whether it be Emmanuel Mosley or Josh Norman, Ambry Thomas on the outside, even Kwan Williams on the interior in the slot, none of it scares me as a Cowboys fan or as an evaluator looking at guys like Amari Cooper, Cedric Wilson, and CeeDee Lamb. It just is a little bit of a mismatch, and honestly, the biggest mismatch of this entire game. Because when you look at the other side of the ball, I do think that the San Francisco 49ers have a chance to be able to run the football against the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys, over the past 5 to 10 years, have really struggled with this type of rushing attack. Now, this is a completely different defense at this point. It's led by a different man at the top at defensive coordinator, and it's got guys like Micah Parsons and Keanu Neal. And I know that Neal isn't the best player in the world, but he's got speed, and that's something that these Cowboys teams haven't had in a long time. There is one huge change for the Cowboys this week. It is that Kelvin Joseph will be playing on the outside at cornerback. They are going to be moving Anthony Brown into the slot. And then obviously you have Trayvon Diggs on, the other side or on the wide receiver one. It'll be interesting to see how they match Trayvon Diggs up because he travels with guys, which is something that I was told a million times today. And so it'll be interesting to see how often he is traveling with Diggs, how often he is traveling with Deebo Samuel and how often he is traveling with George Kittle. I expect him to be on Kittle for quite a few of the third down targets that when he's formation out.
Well, I do think that if Diggs is going to be following Debo, I think it creates that recipe for disaster because this is one of the keys to victory that I have is, for the 49ers, you have to have these explosive plays against a susceptible Cowboys defense that does give up an explosive play here or there. In the playoffs, this is where it really matters. And we talk about Deebo Samuel's catch rates. I mean, obviously for him, averaging 18.2 yards per reception is ridiculous. The space he creates to get open and then how hard he is to tackle presents a problem. So I don't know if you necessarily want to put Trayvon Diggs on that much. We'll talk about Stephon Diggs a little bit later here, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, he's playing in Saturday's matchup here. I do think, though, that when we look at San Francisco's secondary, I agree with you. They've been giving up plays through the air all season long. They've had a very difficult time finishing on the football when it's in the air, locating guys. Now, Ambry Thomas was obviously able to do that last week against the Los Angeles Rams, intercepting Matthew Stafford in overtime. I do think that this is probably going to be the more entertaining game of all the games, in my opinion, here for Wild Card Weekend. I think this is the one that Adam Beasley even projected and maybe predict a little bit earlier. This could be the one game where the Cowboys are one and done. Now, this week, I've picked the 49ers, and I think this is going to be an evenly matched game in a sense from an offensive output. The question is whose defense makes the less mistakes. And look, you mentioned it. Dallas's defense is very aggressive. They play very hard. They play very fast. However, if they do give up a couple of big plays like we saw early on in the season, like when they played the Denver Broncos of all people, Trayvon Diggs getting bit on a double move by Tim Patrick, giving up a touchdown. Can they stop the run? That's going to be the thing. Now, the thing here for the 49ers that kind of leads into your player, your X-factor player here, and that is Elijah Mitchell here of the 49ers. Give us a little bit more about what he needs to do in this matchup to help contribute, to help give the 49ers the best chance to win.
Find open space, which is something that they do really well in the rushing attack. Now, I'm confident that the Dallas Cowboys are going to win this football game, and it just comes down to Dak over Jimmy. I think that the Cowboys are a better team overall, and although I do think that the 49ers are a bad matchup for the Dallas Cowboys, I think that the Cowboys are more talented overall, and I think that Dak Prescott is the markedly better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't even think that it's close. But Elijah Mitchell can break all of this and go away because we just saw them come down from 17-0 after halftime by running the ball, which is something that the San Francisco 49ers do better than anybody else in the NFL. We saw it in the playoffs a couple of years ago when I believe Jimmy threw like 7 passes total to win a playoff game. They don't care. Jimmy Garoppolo. Kyle Shanahan doesn't care. He'll do whatever it takes to win the football game. And the best opportunity for him to win a football game is probably to turn around and toss the ball and hand the ball off to Elijah Mitchell and to Deebo Samuel in the backfield. But Mitchell is the big X factor in this game because he is the guy who is going to touch the ball the most in that backfield. And with those toss zone looks that they give, it's really tough to really drive downhill and get splash plays behind the line of scrimmage, which the Cowboys are so adept at doing. It's going to be interesting if they can stop the run. It's going to be an ugly game, and the Cowboys are going to walk away with it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the 49ers are going to be able to run the ball pretty well. And I'm looking at like a 30-24 style game. I think there will be points scored.
Okay, you heard it here from Dalton. My Dallas Cowboys key to victory is going to be dominate the time of possession and finish drives inside the red zone. You can't stall out, and I don't think this is a game you can settle for many field goals, especially if you have short yardage situation. Can you feed the ball to Ezekiel Elliott? How effective will Tony Pollard be? I know that's one thing we're really looking at, especially as he deals with that Liz Frank injury to his foot. I mean, that's a tough thing to have to try to play through, as we've talked about here on the show. I'm really excited to see if that contribution is going to go there.
It is, but he did play with it for a week, and he was still a freak. So I'm really not too worried about Tony Pollard being able to give it a game here. After that, we'll see.
We'll have to see how it goes. Obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have coverage here at ProFootballNetwork.com all throughout the wildcard playoffs into the division round, conference championships, and we're going to be there for the Super Bowl